In 2008, we took a missions trip to Nairobi, Kenya. And while we were in Nairobi, we heard about a project that was going on in Kisumu, the third largest city in Kenya, and a population of about 350,000 people. But it has one thing that no city in America has, and that is that 15% of the people of Kisumu, 53,000 people in that city that are HIV positive. The very first place that we stopped was a school for young age children who, because they had lost their parents, their family, they weren't able to pay tuition to go to school. And so as part of this project, the school was a volunteer program, didn't require the children to pay tuition to attend it. I asked the headmaster how many of these children were orphans. He looked at me kind of funny and then asked me to repeat the question. And of course, the language barrier, you kind of think that, well, maybe he just didn't understand what I was saying. And so I asked him again, I said, well, how many of these children are orphans? And he looked at me very curiously and said, he goes, they're all orphans. The fact is that there are 16 million orphan children from HIV/AIDS. I guess what I began to realize is that I was the one that day getting the elementary school education. Along our journeys, we stopped and picked up one of the social workers, and we walked down to the property. There's two buildings on the property, and one of the older boys that she wanted us to visit with. The first thing I noticed was there was just only a bed and a table in this one-room house, and on the table was a tin plate, and there was a cob of dried corn in the plate with just a few kernels kind of laying around it. Yeah, his parents had died of AIDS some time ago, and then it was just him and his younger brother that was living on that property. And I asked him if there was anybody working the land to farm the land, and he said that he goes, we've tried to grow crops here, but when it comes harvest time, he says, people come and steal the crops when we're away to school. Even when they would try to provide for themselves, they would have this struggle, if you would, to help themselves, and then as other people would take from them, then they would just kind of be left in the same situation that they were to begin with after losing their mom and dad. The social worker told us that one cob of corn that was there on that table, that she had provided that for them, and that had given that to them 7 days ago. And I had asked Samuel if there was something that we could do to provide for them. And he said, well, if you wanted to buy some groceries for them, let's go to the store, and I'm gonna give you some money, and provide for them whatever food supplements or food supplies that they could use to feed themselves for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. She came out of the store with a bag of groceries in her hand, and she had tears running down her face, and I asked her if everything was okay, and she says, she goes, just maybe they'll see the love of Jesus Christ played out in you by providing them this bag of groceries, and just maybe I'll be able to bring them to Christ today. And I thought to myself, man, one bag of groceries, that's all it takes. I wanted to buy groceries for everybody that day. The last thing that we did that day was we visited a grandmother who was taking care of her 9 grandchildren because she had lost every single one of her children to HIV/AIDS. She kind of described how each one of them had contracted AIDS and that had passed away one at a time, and then she was left with their children, her grandchildren, to provide for. The very first thought occurred to me is, how does she provide for them? She said to me that she washes clothes for people and that she looks for food. If you really kind of start to think that comment through, if she hasn't money to purchase food for them, and if she's not stealing food for them, then where do you look for food? The result and the outcome of that, in my mind, was they're not eating very healthy food. And it wasn't a very big house, and I started to kind of assess that as well, thinking there's 9 grandchildren, how they all fit into that one little room house. She knew that if and when she dies, she really just didn't know what was going to happen to the grandchildren. And, you know, what is the answer? I mean, what do you tell somebody like that who has all those kids to take care of, and she's really the only thing that stands between tragedy and hope for those young kids. And then when she dies, what is there? In Swaziland, HIV/AIDS is so high, almost I believe it's 50% of people from the ages of 20 to 28 are HIV positive. And what's going to happen, because that generation is going to be totally obliterated by this disease. And what are the economics of that situation, not only to that generation, but the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that? It changes things forever. What we know as the norm is no longer true.